All right, welcome back to the Law&Crime Network. Linda Kenny Bodden is gone. She will be back hosting, though, from 3 to 5. I still have Gene Rossi with me. We've been covering the Keene sentencing, murder conviction, sentenced to life at that prison. We've been covering a lot across the spectrum. We're going to be covering some more. I told you it was going to be a hot show, but we got to go to top crime stories. We'll take a look and we'll talk on the other end. Okay. Well, we're not going to go to top crime stories, so I'm going to say, Gene Rossi, you know what this is like? It's like when you make minestrone. Are you with me, Gene? You use the analogy. We love the food analogies. Now, I want you to understand how I'm making this minestrone here today at the Law&Crime Network. It starts off with a nice, garlic and oil and tomatoes and that's you and Linda Kenny Bodden and myself. We're the base. But we got all sorts of vegetables and things going in there. We covered Flynn. We covered Dyke, first time that they ever were on the show, and that included Flynn. We did the Watts case because that's the case that keeps on giving. We just did Keene. We're going to be doing the comp cover-up trial. Gene, it is the perfect legal minestrone soup. You got to give it to me in 5 seconds. Is my analogy on, Gene? Am I right about this, or am I just thinking that I'm really hungry?
It's an A. It would have been an A+ if you mentioned polenta.
You love that polenta. Now, I'm not a big fan personally, but when you come into the city, me and you are going out, and I'm going to have polenta, and I'm buying. But listen, I promise you top crime stories. Here they are.
Here are today's top crime stories trending on lawandcrime.com and across the country. A woman in South Carolina fatally shot an escaped inmate when he kicked in her back door minutes after escaping a county jail. The unidentified woman reportedly fatally shot 30-year-old Bruce McLaughlin Jr. as he headed toward her bedroom inside of her Pickens County home, armed with a knife sharpening tool. McLaughlin Jr. allegedly escaped the Pickens County jail with the help of another inmate, Timothy Dill, after overpowering guards. Investigators believe the shooting was justified, but have forwarded the case file to prosecutors. A court in New Mexico will decide whether a man should go free after serving 6 years in prison for killing 5 members of his family as a teen. 21-year-old Nehemia Griego fatally shot his mother, Sarah, and father, Greg, as well as his 3 siblings, ages 2, 5, and 9, in their home before driving to the church where his father was a pastor and confessing to the killings. Now a judge must determine if Griego is rehabilitated and can be reintroduced into society. Griego faces the possibility of serving 120 years as an adult. Former NFL cornerback Brandon Browner was sentenced to 8 years in prison after pleading no contest to charges of attempted murder in Los Angeles. The 33-year-old former New England Patriots player reportedly broke into his ex-girlfriend's house and threatened to kill her while holding her captive. Browner allegedly fled the scene of the crime with a $22,000 Rolex watch. As part of the plea agreement, prosecutors dropped other charges, including 2 counts of child endangerment, for the plea of no contest to the attempted murder charge. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime.
All right, welcome back. I'm Bob Bianchi. Gene Rossi, we did top crimes earlier today, and if any of you didn't see it, you're going to have to go check it out. And we're always on YouTube. These are posted on the Law and Crime Network YouTube channel. Certainly go there and check out the website as well. But, Gene, we talked about Browner before, the football player. Well, we're not going to get it. Me and you both agree, arrogance, an attitude, a sense of entitlement. Linda thinks it may be concussions. So far, it's 2-1 on that. Although you guys are 2-1 on me on whether or not the cover-up case should be a jury trial or a bench trial. We'll get into that in a minute. But let's talk about the woman who escapes and the inmate who escapes, and the woman fatally shoots the escapee. I'm going to make a prediction, Gene Rossi. I'll put the Swami hat on, look in the crystal ball. No charges filed. What do you think?
Yeah, and if it went to trial, it'd be jury nullification. Absolutely. No charges. Yeah,
my father-in-law is a retired lieutenant from the NYPD, and he makes a valid point, whether you agree with this or you don't disagree with it. If you were to shoot somebody that you believed was an escaping felon and it turned out not to be an escaped felon, that's a problem. But people have a way of being able to square the corner, or circle the corner, if you will, if the person was, quote unquote, not a good guy. They tend to kind of, he deserved it. Have you seen that dichotomy that goes on that way, Gene?
Absolutely. Bob, going back to the Van Dyke trial, I happen to believe that when Van Dyke put those 16 bullets into McDonald, the victim, It was his mind's going, this guy's been a pain in the neck. He deserves it. Part of me says that's what was going through his mind.
Yeah, we are going to actually cover that in the next block, because I agree with you that there's a lot about what goes on culturally or even in people's minds about how they're perceiving a thing, and then all of a sudden it's kind of like, in that particular case, the problem is that everyone went into the quote-unquote cover-up mode. But with regard to, I remember there was a case, Gene, in Jersey where Joyce Carnegie was an orange police officer who was shot and killed by a guy, and they caught somebody that they believed was the suspect, the police department, and then lo and behold, while handcuffed, he wound up going down a flight of stairs in the Orange PD. He was pepper sprayed and maced in close proximity. I don't know if you could see me if you get a split screen here, but he actually literally cupped his mouth and sprayed the pepper spray in, and the guy died. Problem, well, obviously there's a lot of problems with that. They covered that all up about how that happened. Many people went to federal prison as a result of it. But the additional problem was it was the wrong guy. The guy did not kill the police officer. And getting back to my father-in-law's point of view, his point of view was, had that case been investigated and it was the guy who killed the cop, he didn't think that charges would have been brought.
I totally agree. Absolutely. Big difference.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, Gene, great. Always to talk to you about top crimes. And as I promised, we have, with the cop cover-up case, we're going to get into some of what Gene was talking about before. It's a fascinating trial. It's currently not in court today, but will continue for the rest of the week. We're covering it here at the Law and Crime Network. Dan Abrams' production, gavel to gavel. It's an important case. It's the sequel to the Laquan's death at the hands of Jason Van Dyke, who was convicted of convicted of murder and is now serving a state prison sentence. We have a little bit of a package to give you a background so that me and Gene can talk to you about the sequel, the cop cover-up case.
3 Chicago police officers are facing obstruction of justice and conspiracy charges for reportedly lying about the shooting death of a black teenager. Prosecutors say former Detective David March, Officer Thomas Gaffney, and former Officer Joseph Walsh intentionally attempted to conceal the facts of the killing of 17-year-old Laquan McDonald. Laquan was shot and killed by the trio's colleague, Jason Van Dyke. Van Dyke was indicted in 2015 for shooting the victim 16 times. He took the stand in his trial and claimed that he shot because the victim, who was holding a knife, was coming towards him.
What was Laquan McDonald doing?
Advancing on me.
And did you say anything to Laquan McDonald?
I was yelling at him, drop the knife. I yelled it, I don't know how many times, but that's all I yelled.
And did he keep advancing toward you?
He never stopped. He waved the knife from his lower right side upwards, across his body, towards my left shoulder.
And when he did that, what did you do, officer?
I shot him.
But some state witnesses had a different story.
Before you see him fall, did you see him raise his arm as if he was attempting to stab anyone?
No.
Did you see him attack anyone?
No.
Did you see him walk, run, or charge at any officers?
No.
Van Dyke was found guilty in October of second-degree murder and 1 count of aggravated battery for each of the 16 shots. He was acquitted of official misconduct. Court documents accuse March, Walsh, and Gaffney of a medley of crimes, including mischaracterizing video recordings, creating false police reports, and failing to report false information in order to protect themselves and Van Dyke. The indictment claims that Walsh, Gaffney, and another unknown person reported they were victims of McDonald, and another unnamed person was injured by the offender. That claim was allegedly reviewed and submitted by Detective March. It also says a reported false claim attributed to Officer Walsh stated that the victim attempted to get back up after being shot while still holding the knife. Claims that the video evidence of the shooting does not support. All of the officers entered a not guilty plea to the charges. For Law and Crime, I'm Rachel Stockman.
Hey, Rachel, that was an amazing recap of a complex case. It's very much appreciated. It is also a paper case, and as Rachel indicated, there is questions as to whether these officers committed a conspiracy, a cover-up in order to help Van Dyke. One of the state's witnesses in the case is Steve Maris from the Information Services of the Chicago Police Department. Prosecution is bringing in a lot of witnesses to talk about policies, procedures, and how information flows in what I believe to be a fascinating case. Let's take a look. Okay, welcome back. That is Steve Maris from Chicago PD Information Services. Gene, we have a short period of time. The lawyer, I like this guy's style. I know it's debatable. People are saying that you know, he's a little too aggressive, whatever. I like him, but he keeps bringing up this thing. I mean, this is a bench trial. It's a judge that, you know, he's not guilty of any of this because he preserved the video. And that is not what's being. First of all, some things weren't preserved. The argument is that witnesses were, that civilian witnesses were let go, and he never went out to get them. That there were individuals that he didn't interview, that he told an officer what to write in her report. The information that he gave to the medical examiner was deceptive, and moreover, that his overall conclusion as the investigating chief detective of this case was that the statements that Laquan was moving towards Van Dyke and advancing on Van Dyke as opposed to the other way around was consistent with the video. That's the case for the state.
That's devastating, because if Marsh looked at the video before he did the reports, it's game over, whether it's jury or bench. But I got to stress, you brought up a good point. Who cares if he does his job and takes the video and puts it in a little plastic bag and seals it? If he had somehow tampered with that, burned it, lost it, that would have looked horrible, absolutely horrible. I don't know if they would have had a case, but it would have looked horrible.
Yeah, in the end, Gene, it's like a mathematical question for me. It comes down to what your conclusion is. Not that you gathered every evidence, it's whether you gave an honest, forthright, objective, reasonable conclusion based on the evidence. And if the evidence is 2, and another piece of evidence is 2, and another piece of evidence is 2, you don't sit there and say, I have 2 and 2 and 2, and that obviously equals 11. That's the problem. The conclusion was inconsistent with a fair and objective and reasonable facts. That's the state's argument. We got to go to break. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. So in this cop cover-up trial, those are motions made by the defense attorneys trying to exclude evidence. Gene Rossi, it's not going to happen. All those reports, it's a case about reports. It's a case about emails. It's a case about whether or not the investigation was skewed. Now, I want to talk to you about something that we talked about last week that I think is really important. In the brief that was filed by Chicago against David March and Joseph Walsh and Thomas Gaffney, it references in there this email by a superior officer in the case. And in that email, it's basically giving a roadmap as to why are we being concerned about this. Van Dyke's shoot was good, and here are the reasons why. And the state then bolds out in that very lengthy email the lies that they argue that this lieutenant made. And, you know, I just want to talk to you about something about culturally here, okay, rather than these legal motions that are going on. When a lieutenant sends something out and March is getting it, who's underneath him, and this lieutenant assigned March this investigation, and he's saying things like, you know, this is all the stuff that Van Dyke confronted, and this guy was violent, and he tried to rob somebody else, and he was trying to disarm. Boy, it puts a lot of pressure on the investigating junior officer.
Oh, absolutely, and Bob, it's a circle the wagons mentality, and it's almost like that movie A Few Good Men with Jack Nicholson and Tom Cruise, where somebody was got the red notice and they killed the Marine, and then Colonel Jessup basically is telling the subordinate, make it right. Here's what really happened. That the pressure on March actually is somewhat of a defense for him. Is that I'm relying on what my superior told me. I carried the ball across the line. Don't convict me. You should be convicting him. I was just taking orders.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would fly with a judge, though.
You know, Gene, it's something I wish that we had 2 hours to talk about.
Yes.
How they can be easily influenced like this until something really bad happens. But that chain of command is so powerful in their minds because it's a mechanism by which they survive on the streets, and it's pounded into them. And it's pounded into them that if you don't listen, you go from what I used to call the A team to the B team. And when you're on the B team, you will get killed by paper cuts in your career. And so people have a way of just thinking that very Pavlovianly, if that's what my lieutenant says, 10-4, sir, that's the way it is. I'm just sorry, that exists in the real world. Anyway, let's go to the prosecution's argument in this cover-up trial. All right, welcome back. Cop cover-up case, records guy, given information from the Chicago PD. Now, Gene, I want to go back to the submission by the people of the state of Illinois, and this was for the motion made to introduce the co-conspirator statements, which was granted. It was an easy motion to make. Now, we were talking about culture. What is being referenced here are a number of emails, right? So you could see the ball starting to roll. They're meeting afterwards. They're talking about this videotape. And when this lieutenant and the prosecutor specifically bulge out, says all this stuff that was written to March and to all the FOP people and everyone that could listen, like, come on, man, this is wrong what's happening, that this Laquan is the problem. He was a threat to the officers. He justifies this lieutenant, the shooting of 16 shots lasting 12 seconds, and we are trained to shoot that way to eliminate the threat and neutralize the threat. And then even in this document, the FBI, when it was investigating it, was calling these officers essentially the victims based on emails going back and forth. And, quote, we are recently investigating a police-involved shooting that involves an offender that assaults a police officer with a knife. In other words, once the narrative is created, it just keeps like the telephone game when you're in kindergarten. It just keeps on going and going and going with little distortions along the way, and people are just believing what the initial narrative was, which clearly is objectively not what the tape shows. And we talked about pressure before on March, but now we're talking about a political campaign amongst all officers with these emails.
What this shows is the three defendants on trial right now may not be the only ones who conspire to obstruct justice.
Right.
That's really disturbing to me. That you would suggest, anybody suggest, that Laquan McDonald may have committed suicide?
I was trying to commit suicide by cop, yeah.
Yeah, suicide by cop. And that we should be applauding the actions of Jason Van Dyke. And, Bob, I got to tell you, it goes back to what we talked about. I, honest to God, feel that in the back of their mind, even subconsciously, they are saying, you know what? He got killed. He took 16 bullets. But what happened before? He deserved it. Mm-hmm. No. I can't help but feel that that's what they're thinking.
I agree, and I mean no disrespect to our police officer friends, but those who are being fair and unbiased is what we call cop logic, right? Now, Gene, one more thing. On March 15th, 2015, this lieutenant sends an email out, which they allege is false information, that Jaquan McDonald, they don't even have the name right, was an active assailant who, while armed with a dangerous weapon, this is the lieutenant, threatened the imminent use of force to cause death or serious injury when he incised the tire and stabbed the windshield of the CPD vehicle occupied by Gaffney and initiated imminent force likely to cause death or serious injury when initiated an attack against Joseph Walsh. And that was sent, and it says here in the document, my last point to read, and I'm interested in your point of view, the statement is virtually identical to the conclusion of the false case summary report submitted by March on March 15th, 2015, submitted as an official report. This lieutenant approved it, and basically that was his conclusion. And again, it's the politics of it. And I've seen the blinders of cops when they're looking at other cops where they're justifying these reactions. But this is damning evidence. But you're right. I'm wondering whatever happened to that lieutenant.
I don't know. Do Dan and Anthony still have their jobs? My goodness gracious, I got to tell you, this really upsets me that they acted like this for a murder that was actually horrendous. Yeah, and if they do if they do it for a murder, this is what bothers me. If they do it for a murder, Bob, what are they going to do for a low-level schmuck who basically sells an ounce of crack? I mean, really?
No, I agree, but I'd like to get into the deeper part that you just said. There's a thing where I believe, I call it the mystery of faith when I was prosecutor. It's like the mystery is they believe it despite all objective evidence. I've listened to the lawyers used to sit on one side, the cops side used to sit on the other side of my command staff, and sometimes we would talk like, do they even recognize that falsifying a report, not that we were investigating other things, is not a good thing, because they would tend to just, oh, you don't understand, that's the way cops are, and it's what we used to affectionately refer to as the hot wash of factual data. And these were good people. They were good professionals. But when it came to cops, it was a different story.
Yeah. I just remembered, we all remember the Rodney King trial. Okay. They were acquitted in Simi Valley at the state level. Then the feds got them. But I remember vividly when they were going through that video, frame by frame, and each officer, I don't know if all of them testified, but they were doing what Van Dyke could not do. They were freeze-framing a frame and going through the mind of the defendant. And even though the video looked horrendous, when they froze the frame, they were able to explain what was going on in their mind at that second. Mm-hmm. They weren't able to do that here. But that gets to their whole mentality, as you're talking about.
Right. Okay. Great, Gene Rossi. I really appreciate it. As always, we're going to go to a break, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. I'm Bob Bianchi. Gene Rossi, this guy is on the stand. He's providing a lot of critical data in the case. But let's go to his legal point of view. You know, proving what's in the mind of a person. I like to say that we are all deluded, okay? We are all, as human beings, deluded. Some are more deluded than others. And this mystery of faith that I talk about is believing what it is that you write, despite the fact that all objective evidence points to the contrary. Is that a defense here to this?
Well, it could be. Yes, it could be, because we're talking witness tampering and obstruction, and you have to have a corrupt mind. And when you charge a corrupt mind allegation, the level of intent has to be very, very high, specific. So it could be a defense. I did want to mention, Bob, I thought I heard Fairfax PD use of force expert. Mm-hmm. That's my area. There was a murder, a shooting on a Parkway near D.C. It occurred in Fairfax County, Virginia. And if it's the same use of force expert, they have not released the video of that altercation that resulted in someone being shot to death. I'm not sure they released the video yet. So I'm very, very intrigued that they talked to the Fairfax PD use of force expert. But going back to what you said, what's in a person's mind, even if objectively what they say is not consistent with the video, it could defeat a charge that involves corrupt motive. It could, possibly.
Right. Well, you know, Gene, I try to deceive and delude myself as much as possible each and every single day. In fact, I have this image that Linda Kenny Bodden, who is soon to be hosting, is off to my left right here, ready to sit in this chair. But she's not getting in this chair until we look at one more clip of Steve Maris. Okay, those are the emails that we were reading before that are in the state submission. Listen, guys, we have been here today. We have covered Flynn. We had Mediaite for the first time. They're going to start doing segments here about law and the media. That was really, really exciting. We did Watts. We did Keene. We did the cop cover-up case. I had Linda Kenny Bodden, who was a guest. She's going to be coming on to host. It's always a pleasure to be here at the Law&Crime Network. Gene Rossi carried me through from the beginning all the way to the end. Can we get a split screen of Gene Rossi, please? You know, Gene, I won't be back till next Monday. That's 5 days. I just had to take another look at that beautiful faccia of yours and say, I'll see you next week. Everybody, you be well. We'll be back.